Level 88. We can fill in this row with walls. Now there's only one crystal, so it needs to connect to all the bombs and bunnies. So it needs empty space here and here. That lets us fill in this column with walls. That grays out this row. So this bomb hits this bunny. That means this bunny has to be hit by this bomb. And we see these two rows have 9 walls. And there needs to be a path somewhere on this row to this row. And that has to be vertical. It can't be diagonal since there's only one free space on each row. So either, and of course it can't be here. It has to be here, 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 or maybe here. Or actually, it could be another one of these. That means these are not free, neither are these. Also, this has to be a free space, so it doesn't wall in this. So we can fill in this row. And that grays out this column and this one. This has to be a free space to make a path. That lets us fill in this row. Also, there needs to be a path. Of course, here needs to be a path. There needs to be a path here, which means that at least one space in each of these columns up here are empty. And since there are 7 walls in each column, that means these can't be empty. So let's see here. We need a path down here. If that path is here, that can't be because this column needs to have 7 walls. If the path is here, then we need to wall off here, which obviously can't be. So the path down needs to be either here, but that can't be because there's not enough walls left on this column. So it has to be here. And then we need to fill in these rows with walls. And now the wall in this row has to be here, lest it create an empty space that is unconnected. This is a wall. These are not. Now this column is grayed out, and that lets us fill in this row with walls. Now this is gray, and this, let's see. Each of these columns has one more wall. And for us to make a path here, these walls have to be on the same row. And we see that this row only has one more wall to place. So it can't be one of these. Well, it can't be these. So it has to be these 3. So now these 3 are grayed out. This is grayed out. There's one more wall to place, and it must be here. Level 89. So the equation is 2x plus 3y equals 12. We see y has to be 2 or more. So the only possible solutions here are x equals 0, y equals 4, or x equals 3, y equals 2. In other words, y cannot be 3. So it's not this. Yeah, y has to be 2. That means x has to be 3. Let's see here. X has to be 3. Also, this x cannot hit this bunny, because that would make a connection between these 2 crystals. It has to hit 3. So it must hit these 3. anything else, if it hits this one, you have a connection between these two. If it hits this one, there's a connection with this. But it has to hit these three. And we have the same thing here. Can't hit this bunny. That will make a connection here. And it has to connect to this one. So it has to hit these three. And that leaves these bombs, which has to hit, they have to hit these bunnies. Now let's see here. You can't, in this row, there's one wall. You can't have a connection between these zones. So can't have a wall in these spaces. Could potentially have a wall here, making a diagonal or something. But anyway, these can't be walls. And it's the same down here. These can't be walls. And neither can this. Now, this column can be filled in with walls. That grays out this row. And this column can be filled in, graying out this row. Also, we see we need separation here. So now this row is gray, and this column has two more walls. This row is grayed out. These columns can be filled in with walls. So can this. Now this is grayed out. One of these has to be a wall, so these are not. This row can be filled in. Now this is gray. This has to be a wall. We can fill in this row. Now this is grayed out, and there's one space left, which has to be a wall. Level 90. We can start off by blocking bombs from each other and crystals from each other. Of course, they all have to be separated. See, we can't leave empty spaces here. So now we see this crystal is unconnected, and it has to connect to these, which can't be connected to any of the other crystals. So it needs a path now somewhere to get around, and it can't touch these. So the path has to go like this. We need walls. It can't touch here either. It has to go here. Has to be a wall here. And there has to be a wall here. So now this is gray. This must be a wall. Now this is gray. And this can't be a wall, but this has to be a wall. So let's see. So it needs to be some path down here, which means this is going to connect to these spaces eventually, which means they can't connect to this. Let's see, this row has one more wall. And what if that wall is here? Possible. Let's see, what if these two... There's two more walls here, right? And this can't be an open space because that would block off here. So this has to be a wall. Also, the remaining walls on these rows have to be on the same side. So there's one more space on this row. It has to connect to this to make a path up. So it can't connect here. This has to be a wall. Now this is gray. There's one more wall here on this column and on this one. This has two more. So now this is gray. And since this has to connect to this has to be a wall. Graying out this row. This column has 4 walls. And we need a path, at least up here. So it has to be here. There's one more wall in this row, graying out this column, which means the wall in this row has to be here. And the final space has to be a wall. Level 91. First, let's separate some bombs. I think that's most of them. Now, we can see, as is somewhat cryptically indicated here, 10 enemies, 1 XYAB, and the same down here, which I guess indicates that these are separate from these. And indeed, none of these bombs can hit any of these bunnies, and vice versa. And so we get this equation: x plus y plus a plus b equals 10, both here and here. And that's very neat because here we see that x can be 0 or 1 or 2. And also the way the bunnies are configured, or x could be 3. The way the bunnies are configured, these have to be hit together, right? And so here we see x equals 1 or 2 or 3 or 0. But here, x equals 1 or 4 or 5 or 0. It has to be 1 or 0. Here you see, let's see, take y. So y equals 2 or 3 or 5 or 0. And here it is 4 or 3 or 7 or 0. So it's 3 or 0. Now a, 2 or 3 or 5 or 0. So it's probably 2. Could also be 3. And B, 4, 3, 7, or 0, 4 or 1. So let's see here. In this row, we need 4 walls total. At least 1 here leads. We need at least 1 here and 1 here. So since there has to be a bomb in one of these two and one of these two, neither of these can be 0. Also, let's see here, one of these bunnies have to be hit by something. So either of these are empty. It means we can fill out the rest of the row with walls. So one of these is walls. Now what happens if any of these are 0? That is a question. Well, I guess I'll think about that later. Now let's see here. B can't be 1. Because this can't possibly hit 1. Which means this bunny has to be hit by the X. And B can't be 4. Well, it can be 4. But B cannot be 3, so this has to be a wall. Now let's see. A, can it be 3? It can be 3. Possibly. It can be 2, but it can't be 1. It can't be 1, so it has to hit these or nothing. As the X can't be 3, so it can't, and it can't be 4. So this has to be a wall, and this has to be a wall. And that means this X has to hit these. So now this row is grayed out, and we see this crystal is connected. And also, you can fill in this row. The rest have to be walls. Now, of course, this bomb should not hit this bomb. Now we see A can only be 0 or 2. What about here? Yeah, 0 or 2. We can't hit these 3, which means they have to be hit by Y. So now Y, yes, has to be 3, of course. Now these can only be hit by this, and so they have to be, which means A equals 2, and these have to be hit by this. Now we can fill in this row. Also, these have to be hit by this. There has to be a wall here and here. These have to be walls because we can't have isolated empty spaces. There is one more wall on this row, which has to be somewhere here, so it can't be here. And now we see these are connected to this crystal. And we see that this row has 7 walls. There are 3 walls left, which means these will be connected somehow to these, and so are connected to this one. So they have to be separated from this one. And I see we can fill in this column here, which grays out this row. And now we see the connection with this crystal here. This is grayed out. And that lets us fill in this column with walls. So this column only has 1 wall, and that has to separate this zone from this crystal, since this zone is connected to this one. And we already established that these will connect here. So that means that the wall has to be somewhere here. Ergo, not here. We can fill in this column with walls, and that grays out this row. This column is grayed out. And now we see we need some separation here. There's 1 wall left on this row. Must be somewhere here. Can't be here. And there are 3 left on this row. The only way to get a full wall off between these and these would be this. I'm pretty sure. Now this column is grayed out. This column can be filled in, the rest with walls. Now this row is grayed out, and we need separation. This is one zone, this is another, so these must be walls. That grays out the row. Now we can fill out this column, and this one This one is gray. And we can also fill in this column. Now, this row has 11 walls. We can fill in that too. Now we can fill in this column. And this one. We can fill in this column. And this one. And now there's one space left, which must be a wall.